Hello and welcome to another flying video with flight level 180. As you can tell, there's not a lot of noise coming from the airplane. We are practicing engine failures in the Grumman Tiger, and this is something I like to do just for preparation for real world flying. Now, before you go out and use anything in this video, I'm not a CFI. This is for simulator purposes only. If you want to try to apply anything that you learn here, keep in mind that you need to talk to your CFI, and I'm not a CFI. So that said, I saw a video recently, or a news item recently, where a super experienced pilot, actually the world record holder in inverted flat spins, was flying from California to Arizona in his pits, and he had a propeller. His propeller flew off from the airplane, and he had to make a dead stick landing. You'd think this would be a very rare thing, but it does happen, and it's something you really need to be prepared for, and it's something you can practice for. So what I like to do is I like to do two things. First thing I like to do is I like to practice, engine outs in flight, like the Pitts pilot had. What if you fuel starvation, which hopefully should never happen, or a complete fuel system failure, or just your propeller flies off or your engine fails. These things do happen, so the best thing is to be prepared for it. So just to talk about the steps when you have an engine failure. Well, the first thing is you want to go ahead, and there's a number of steps that you really should be practicing on the ground for the second you have an engine failure. You just automatically do this, hopefully without even looking. As you pull out the carb heat, you go mixture full rich, you go throttle full, and then you switch your fuel tank, which is maybe the most important thing. Then you turn on your fuel pump. Probably the thing that's going to save you the most often is switching your fuel tank, because either a tank is starved, and I have things, just the airplane's kind of flying on its own here for a second, but typically the tank is starved, or there's a blockage or something like that, and switching the fuel tank will certainly be the most likely scenario. If that doesn't do anything, and hopefully that's like a second max, you need to take and choose a landing site. And in this airplane, I have GPS. You click over, look at your options, making sure you're stable in your airplane. You can go ahead and look at the options, and you want to be aware at all times of what your wind is. My wind I'm flying, I actually started when my engine failed. I was facing 180 degrees in the other direction, and once the engine failed, I just took and chose a downwind airport that was close enough. So I chose 13C, which is 7.4 nautical miles away. Now, so I went ahead and did a 180-degree turn and headed directly for that airport. Then the next thing I did was establish best glide speed, which is actually 72 knots in this airplane. It's something you should absolutely know and be cognizant of as you're flying along, of what your glide speed is. I could probably get a little more glide out of it, so I'll nose up a little bit. I have it on autopilot right now since I'm talking, and maybe it's not such a bad idea to use autopilot when you have this situation, at least while you're sorting things out and trying to get the engine solved. Next thing you want to do is attempt a restart. So let's go ahead and attempt the restart. So mixture, carb heat off, try the starter, nothing. And I actually failed it with an X-plane, so that's not going to help me much. Now I'm in full IMC, so I'm going to turn on my pitot heat, since we are probably pretty close to icing conditions. Next thing we're going to do is notify ATC. ATC, mayday, mayday, mayday. Grumman 462 has full engine out. I am going to airport 13 Charlie. I am at 6,000 feet, one solo on board. And, tell them what you're doing. Don't ask for permission. Ask them to clear the way. And the next thing you want to do is basically land. Now you notice I have plenty of time to actually work this out. I'm at 6,000 feet. Now, there's some strategic decisions here. You really want to be the higher the better when you're flying when it comes to engine outs. And the pilot of the pits actually talked about this. He always encourages his students and people he talks to, you know, fly higher so you have time to think. Well, we have time to think and we have options. This airplane has, from 10,000 feet, it can glide 17 miles. From 5,000 feet, it can glide 8.5 miles. Well, 8.5 miles is really not much when you think about it, unless you're in a very, very airport-rich environment. There's not a lot of options, and there's my field right there. So we're in good shape. I'm going to go ahead and pop off the autopilot and go ahead and start circling in a second. So, you know your best glide speed. Figure out how far you can glide with the airplane. Know where the wind direction is. Know where the nearest airport is in the back of your mind, especially if you don't have a GPS system like this. But you know, you really should know this at all times. Something you need to think about as you're flying along. You know, where, if I have an engine failure, do I need to go? Let's see. So something else I want you to keep in mind here is that we're going to lose our vacuum power. So if your prop is not spinning, and I'm not 100% sure how this would work in a real Tiger, but if your prop is not spinning, you're going to lose vacuum power in a few minutes. So you're going to lose your attitude. You're going to lose your attitude indicator, and you're going to lose your gyro compass. So be comfortable using the magnetic compass. Be comfortable using your VSI in combination with your turn coordinator, because those will still work once you fail. So I'm looking pretty good. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to do a left base here and try to get a sense for if there's anything on the runway and if we can actually make a safe landing. Hopefully we're talking to ATC and have that cleared out. I have a lot of speed here, so I'm probably in pretty good shape. I'll go ahead and stay at about 1,000 feet. Now, one thing that's very important is you want to commit early. If there's no runway, if there's no reasonable airport to make, or if it's very iffy as to whether you're going to make that airport, you know, just go ahead and set it down on a road or pick a field and try to land parallel to the furrows. You know, you're much better off deciding early and just setting it down on a road and trying to keep your passengers alive. Now, next point, we're now getting pretty close where we can go ahead and start dropping our flaps, but I want to make sure I have the field made. You know, at this point, you know, your engine's failed. This is pretty much a write-off. You know, assume that your airplane is dead, and you know, if you damage the airplane, you know, that's the insurance company's problem, in my personal opinion. You know, let's see if we can set this down safely. And you know, given you don't have power and it's a lot harder. That was not a great set down. There we go. So, you know, set the airplane down any way you can where you can conserve the physical well-being of the occupants. You know, if you need to make a gear-up landing, well, this airplane has fixed gear, but if you need to make a gear-up landing, you know, make a gear-up landing. Don't, you know, the insurance company can pay for it. Your airplane's let you down. You know, you can buy another airplane. You can't buy your health or the lives of your passengers. So I think that's a really good thing to do. Now, let me show you exactly how I am setting up to do these flights. So what you do is you just go to Flight Configuration, change location, and you select Get Me Lost. And let me show you what that does. It just takes and it throws you up into a random, somewhat generally in the area of where you were last flying, and puts you at a somewhat random altitude. I mean, let's see where we are here. So we're at 700 feet, and you know, pretty heavy clouds. You know, it's a great way to practice because you know you don't know where you are. You need to figure out what airport to go to. You're going to be at a somewhat random altitude. It changes by a few thousand feet, and it's a really nice challenge. Now, doing this over and over is a great exercise. I think it's really excellent and very interesting. And I strongly recommend it. It's really a good activity, and you're going to find out very quickly, what does the airplane do without power? What kind of fields do you want? And I strongly recommend, if you need to fly a little farther for a larger airport, I strongly recommend that. It really makes a huge difference. Knowing the winds is critical. These things are all important. Now let me show you the other thing I like to do. And we're going to go ahead and let's go ahead and select a random airport. This one looks fine. So, and let's go ahead and get this going. So the other thing I like to do is practicing failures on takeoff. Now, that is the place that the majority of engine failures happen. And, your worst case scenario is 100 feet above the ground or 200 feet, depending on the size of airplane you have, maybe 300 feet. So it's high enough that you don't have enough runway remaining to set it back down, and low enough that you can't turn back to the airport. And let's see, it looks like my simulation's paused. Let's go ahead and pop those in so we can get the noise down. So, those are really your worst case scenarios. So, practice taking off and failing at 300 feet and finding a place to set it down. Have that in mind as you're taking off. Like, if I have a problem, where am I going to put the airplane? So it's just a great exercise, and it's got to be something. It's something that I try to have for my own flying is, I'm thinking about this as I'm taking off. This is the number one risk that, aside from flying into another airplane in the pattern, if my engine goes out, I have to be mentally committed and ready to take the actions I need to take. So in this plane, about 450 feet is the altitude at which I can return to the runway. Anything below that, we're not going to get back. So I mentally, as part of my pre-takeoff discussion, I'm saying, okay, at 450 feet AGL, I'm going to set it back on the, I'm going anything below that, I'm landing straight ahead, something within view, I'm setting it down with a minimal physical damage possible, and with the order being, in this airplane, it's got fixed gear. I'm probably going to go roads first, field second, water last, because the airplane's going to flip over and probably knock me out. But if I'm over 450, once I hit 450, I'm going to say turn back available in the same manner that Cirrus pilots say. They actually touch the parachute handle and say, caps available at 500 feet. Well, at 450 feet, I'm going to say verbally, turn back available, and any failure above that, I'm going to go ahead and turn back. And then the other thing I'm going to try to do is, as I'm taking off, I'm trying to use the exact same profile every time. So I'm going to rotate around 55 knots. I'm going to keep the airplane basically in ground effect to about 90 knots, and I'm going to climb out at 90 knots. And if I'm consistent with that, and I train with that, and I train for failures with that, it makes it easier for my brain to automatically take over when I have the horrible situation of an engine failing. So let's go ahead and edit the failures. So you go to engines, and you go to failures, and then you can go here, and engine fail, you can say fail at 500 feet. Let's make it tough for ourselves. And it doesn't fail quite precisely at 500 feet. It sometimes seems to fail a little bit before. So now we're ready to go. Now the next thing I'm going to do is always, when I'm taking off, I'm always setting my heading to runway heading. So even if I have directions from ATC to turn to 100, right to 120, right to 120, I'm still going to keep the heading bug at runway heading. And the reason for this is because when I have the horrible situation of a engine failure, I need to basically know exactly, I don't want to be stressing looking for the airport and trying to get around. I want to have that additional visual aid to help me get back to to the runway heading. So I'm going to fly all the way around to where the runway heading is here and fly a little bit past it, and that should put the runway right on my nose. And this is less important when it's VFR conditions, but if there's, you know, a 300-foot overhang, this is going to be very important. So let's go ahead and give this a try. So we have the settings, we have everything set, we have our heading bug set. We know at right here, which is 450 feet, we're going to have turn back available, and the engine should fail somewhere in this range. And then we're going to turn back and see if we can make it back safely. So let's give it a try. Now, first thing we do when the engine fails is start putting our nose down a little bit. We don't want to go aggressively down, but you know, you're at 90 knots, you're going to stall out slightly under 60 knots. You don't want to stall the airplane until you're done. So the first reaction has got to be a little bit of nose down to keep our airspeed down. There's 90 knots. And up we go. 100 knots, or 100 feet, 200 feet, 300 feet. We're already in the clouds. 400 feet. Turn back available, and we lost the engine. So let's get our nose down a little bit, and we are coming around aggressively. And that was a little hairy. Really want to be really careful not to get our nose down more than we have to. Okay, there is our runway. We're at 70 knots. And we can go ahead and drop our flaps. And, you know, not a lot of time. You probably could make one call to ATC and say, give them a mayday tell them that you're coming back, or basically make a call on the traffic advisory, but that's pretty much all the time you have. I mean, you only have a few seconds there. Now you note how quickly we started having you know, we were 300 feet AGL. That's, you really want to be careful not to slam your nose down. You will just want to put it down a little bit just to keep your airspeed out so you don't stall. And then you want to turn as pretty aggressively, you know, a 60-degree bank, maybe, to get back to the airport. That's my experience. So I hope you found that helpful. It's just something I just do over and over. And I think it's really good training. Really good training to try to get this stuff ingrained. So I hope that helps for those of you sim pilots. Maybe some of you can apply this to real world situations after discussing with your CFI. And I hope you found that interesting. Please check out my other videos. I have a couple links here of something you'll find interesting, and have a great day.